you cannot use brand registry to enforce an authorized dealer agreement. If you try to knock somebody off on brand registry for an IP complaint because they're reselling a product that you're not authorized to sell, brand registry is intended for actual counterfeit, actual infringement, right? Not, I don't like the fact that somebody else is selling my product, right? Control your supply chain, sign up for transparency, although that has issues. But like, you can't just go and start filing blind IP complaints, because if that happens, what Amazon will do is they'll take your IP complaint, they'll take your reporting rights away.
I'm your host, John Cavendish, and welcome to Season 3 of the Amazon Strategist Show, the show that's all strategy with no hacks, no silver bullets, and no magic pills, just real practical strategies to grow your Amazon business. Today, I'm joined by none other than Paul Raffleson of Raffleson Law and SellerBasics. Paul specializes in e-commerce legal matters, including litigation, IP, M&A, for small to medium-sized clients, and occasionally some tax matters. He also founded SellerBasics, which is a low-cost legal support for Amazon sellers, and he's a recognized expert in the e-commerce industry. He's frequently featured at major news outlets, and he has many degrees from UMass, Villanova, NYU, I'm sure some amazing online ones as well, which he hasn't mentioned, and Pace Law School. So Paul, welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. No online ones yet, but you're never too old to learn.
Never too
So
old to become an online pastor.
yeah, exactly. That's my dream. That's literally where I'm. That's next. That's next. Was that? That's phase 3 of my life. If
You
I'm in
joke.
phase
One of
2.
my business mentors did it, and now he's done adjudicated 17 weddings.
Oh my goodness. All right, I am joking. Okay, it's not really my phase 3. I don't know what my phase. I don't know where I'm going from here, but that's cool. That's cool. I mean, it's nice to see people living out what they want to do. So.
I love it. Cool. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got into the Amazon space specifically?
Yeah, no, well, it was totally, like I said, it's not really for the money of it. It's sort of actually, it was all by accident. I was a lawyer and I was a corporate lawyer. And the reason I say not for the money is because when you're a corporate lawyer and you work in-house, you get paid well and your hours are ridiculous. For example, when I was at GE, we had an official department rule of like summer Fridays were half days, but then like our little group's rule was summer Fridays were full days off. So I could drop my daughter off at daycare and just like, I don't know, do whatever. It was beautiful. In-house life is a beautiful thing. I also was in-house at Walmart, Microsoft. So I spent on many years working in-house and just enjoying this version of legal practice that not many lawyers get to enjoy, especially those who work at big law firms and work insane hours and have billables, right? This is the dream. But what happened was General Electric did this whole big, kind of like Amazon did with their HQ too. We actually did it first. We did our HQ move from Connecticut to Boston. And around that time, I decided I just didn't want to be a part of the Boston. The G was pretty much dismantled at that point. And I didn't really want to be a part of it. So I left and I had no plan. I kind of actually took like a bit of a sabbatical. Like I just went to Europe for a little bit. I just did fun things. And as I was talking to, different law firms, different companies and figuring I'm going to get back into what I was doing before corporate, I was asked to write a blog post about the sales tax attack on Amazon sellers this was 2017. And so I wrote the blog post. And after I wrote the blog post, all the response I got, I was getting invited to podcasts. I was invited to this Retail Global in Las Vegas to speak, and crazy. Like overnight. I'm in CNBC talking about this case and how Trump hates Bezos, crazy things happening. So at that moment, I realized that there's this market of people and they need help. And, Amazon sellers and e-commerce sellers, I call them global small businesses because if you said in the 1980s, I'm a global small business, that sounds ridiculous. How could you be a global small business? But when you add e-commerce into the mix, the reality of a global small business is real. And there really is no lawyer that was actually helping them. I mean, there were suspension lawyers, but not just like fundamental corporate IP, compliance, tax. Like there just wasn't anyone with sort of 50 state, international, multinational corporate law experience supporting the e-commerce community. And this was my background. So I figured out a way to sort of offer that service. The beauty of e-commerce is that there's a certain amount of repetition in our clients and that we know, 90% of your business we kind of know, or 80% of your business we know. It's just what you sell is kind of different. But the rest of it, we kind of understand the challenges. So we were able to leverage that economy of scale to sort of create a law firm that offers that kind of mindset and thought process to smaller e-commerce companies, so you don't have to spend, $1,000 an hour lawyers. That's kind of how it happened. It was just a blog post, and then a little bit of background on me. I was an Amazon seller 20 plus years ago, believe it or not. I used to flip DVDs, video games, other clearance stuff. I use this as a way of, paying law school, trying to, get out of student debt. So I was doing all of that. And then my wife actually worked for Seller Performance when I was at Microsoft. So she worked with another Amazon consultant in the business. And although she was never went into the Amazon consulting space, it was fun that because I was an Amazon seller and I still did it part time when I was working in these companies because I had a lot of free time, especially since she had to work weekends and I didn't. Um, I hung out with the Amazon kids. I hung out. They were more our age than the Microsoft people I work with, so it was cool. Like I would go to dinner with her team, the seller performance team, and they'd just be talking shop at the dinner table, and it would be fascinating to me because I was an Amazon seller. So it was like a weird different elements of my life came together, just sort of put this, it almost felt like fate. Like, this is weird that I've had all these life experiences that, my constitutional law tax experience is now the most important issue for Amazon sellers in 2017. Like, it was just weird. So it felt like I had to go with it. So that's my origin story in a nutshell, I guess.
Oh, thank you for sharing, and that's super interesting. I didn't know that before, and I feel like I've talked to two people this week on two podcast episodes who've said like one blog post or one piece of marketing changed the trajectory of their life and their business because they
Yeah,
just kept putting stuff out there, and like this one thing just drove suddenly all their leads and all of the inflection point. So yeah, when you were talking about what's next and what's the next thing, I was like, yeah, maybe there's a piece of marketing that suddenly becomes the cornerstone of the future. It's very interesting.
absolutely. You never know. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, just keep
Life's
putting stuff out
interesting.
there.
Yeah.
So Amazon comes with a bunch of risks. What are some of the risks that legal risks that it does come with? And I guess for me, the clarification on that is what are some of the risks that actually people should care about, and what are some of the risks that people care about they shouldn't care about? As a lawyer, your answer should be you care about everything to the maximum.
I mean, I think it's degrees of care,
I think it's
depending
gray
on
areas
what
around
you're.
there in the world and
Yeah,
in law and in tax, and these are things that I think the average person should potentially push.
absolutely. Like there's like, for example, if you go back to the early 2017s, like I was the voice speaking about the constitutionality of these tax policies. You had TaxJar and these other companies, urging Amazon sellers, people who are doing like less than $1 million a year in sales, to sign up in all 50 states. Nobody understood how burdensome that is. Like, that's insanity. You're going to spend over six figures trying to comply with that. People didn't realize it's not just sales tax, then it leads to state income tax. There's 12,000 taxing jurisdictions. So there's always gray, right? It wasn't the move to do that. If you were a sub $1 million seller, in fact, it wasn't even the move to do it at all because our position was Amazon's liability the whole time. But even if you wanted to mitigate your risk, like it was like you're almost, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So there's always situations. There's resellers who sell products and the brands hate the resellers, and then the brands send the resellers these threatening legal letters, and the law is gray, right? The law is gray on whether you can resell or not, what these material differences are, and people have to learn to take risks. So it's my job as a lawyer, I think, that first and foremost, is really just to be a risk manager. It's really just to help people understand the risks so they can make informed decisions, and then support that decision that they want to make. If they want to take a risky decision, as long as it's not like illegal, as long as we have some legal basis, go for it. We'll support you. But it's always, gray, where you have to be really, really, really compliant with the law is when it comes to what is putting Amazon at risk. Okay. When is Amazon at risk? So intellectual property. Why does Amazon care so much about intellectual property? Because they don't want to get sued. Because the liability of trademark infringement, patent infringement, copyright infringement could theoretically fall on Amazon if, at any time. And so that's why they police it the way they do, right? They're not really interested in protecting the rights owners or protecting themselves, right? That's why they're taking these actions, because if they just do nothing, they're afraid that some brand, and some brands have tried to do this, will come at them directly and say, you're the infringer because you're the ones effectively selling the product here on the marketplace. So IP is important. Um, Product safety. In the early 2010s, case law about Amazon would say, just like with taxes and many other things, Amazon would say, hey, we're just a marketplace. We're like the flea market, right? We're not responsible if you buy something and it blows up and you die. That's not our fault. You bought it from somebody in China. That's their problem. Go sue the person in China, as if you have any recourse to do that, right? But over time, and there was a case that I worked on with a friend of mine in Pennsylvania called the Oberdorf case, which really sort of started to break down this wall. No, Amazon's actually liable. Like if you, in America, if I go into Walmart or any store and I buy a bottle of Coke and that Coke bottle just explodes in my hand and so say it's made of glass and shatters, I lose an eye, right? Walmart's responsible, even if it wasn't their fault, even if it was entirely 100% Coca-Cola's fault, even if it wasn't even Coke's fault, it was the bottler's fault, right? It doesn't matter. We have this concept of strict liability. Like the store is where you go for recourse. Now the store can go and sue Coke and whomever and try to sort that out, right? But you have a cause of action against the store. So if Amazon is a store, every product they sell that hurts somebody, they're liable for. And over the last 10 years, we've seen courts go from not understanding Amazon's business to just saying, hey, it's a flea market. We would never go after a flea market or the mall. Like you don't blame the mall if the mall, the target is like if you buy that Coke at a Walmart that's in a mall, you don't blame the mall, right? That's a little much because that's just real estate. But what we're seeing is that change. So as Amazon's risk increases, so does the need for compliance. Last example is with for the resellers. Resellers are always concerned about authenticity of goods. Amazon was always about prove authenticity. Now you're seeing Amazon rejecting a lot of suppliers because the last few years, it turns out there are major organized crime rings revolving around retail theft, revolving around Amazon, inside the warehouses. So now Amazon wants to know not only are your goods authentic when you send them into resale, are they actually not stolen, right? So you have to prove that you're working with credible wholesale suppliers or the brand directly. You can't just go to Joe Schmo's Brooklyn downstairs wholesaler Inc. that nobody's ever heard of and bring those products into Amazon. Even if you can prove beyond a shadow of doubt that they're authentic, you haven't solved the other problem. So the risk is on. So when Amazon identifies risk to their business model, they just push it down to you. So that's how we look at risk and from a legal perspective is and that's not to say that there isn't other risk, that the risk that Amazon may not be policing that still puts you at risk. We've had plenty of clients get in trouble for things that, maybe they didn't follow a specific state law regarding shower heads. And, California has a weird law regarding shower heads that no other state has, and people have gotten in trouble for that. So like there's always just a lot out there, but certainly the ones that can cause you to lose your Amazon account, to get suspended, are the ones that obviously Amazon feels like they could be held responsible for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess the clarification question for that is just a small one because we've had clients I've been talking to recently about that, which is like, we have a lot of legal letters being sent to, I mean, this is probably the main business of SellerBasics, one of them, legal letters being sent to brands saying, you're infringing our IP by selling something compatible with or something, something that doesn't infringe IP, but they get a legal firm to send it to the seller through Amazon's system and then they stop responding. So I'm sure that's probably a common thing for our listeners that several people have experienced. Like, what's your experience in dealing with that and how you actually fix that or get Amazon to realize these guys are not playing ball and they're just ignoring us now?
Yeah, so I mean, we have an avenue to discuss certain issues with Amazon legal in situations where we feel like Amazon seller performance or the seller
Yeah, we ask
support
for
isn't
written
doing what
permission
they're
from the brand. Amazon
right, which is not
often.
true. If you read Amazon's policy, you don't actually need written permission from a brand to sell the brand's product. But
And now a very quick message from our sponsor, Seller Candy. Are you dealing with support issues, cases, flat files, suspensions, or even account suspensions? Then Seller Candy is there for you. We take the pain away so you never need to talk to seller support again. If that sounds interesting, head to sellercandy.com to check us out and book a call with our team today. That's it from us. Now back to the episode.
if you read Amazon's policy, you don't actually need written permission from a brand to sell the brand's product. But Amazon still writes it every time. But then you read their policy and it says, no, we don't enforce authorization. We don't enforce authorized dealer agreements. We don't enforce MAP, right? In fact, you cannot use brand registry to enforce an authorized dealer agreement. If you try to knock somebody off in brand registry for an IP complaint because they're reselling a product that you're not authorized to sell, if Amazon finds out about it, and this is something we pushed a couple of years ago, we kind of changed the game a little bit because our seller basics I was just getting fed up with this, and wanted to make Amazon aware of this thing called brand registry abuse, where brands are not using brand registry as intended. Brand registry is intended for actual counterfeit, actual infringement, right? Not, I don't like the fact that somebody else is selling my product, right? Control your supply chain, sign up for transparency, although that has issues. But like, you can't just go and start filing blind IP complaints, because if that happens, what Amazon will do is they'll take your IP complaint, they'll take your reporting rights away, right? Because they'll see you as abusive. But as far as like compatible with, yeah, I mean, you have to appeal to Amazon. You have to say, look, you got to review the listing, because sometimes people do, they do the compatible with, right? Or for, Panasonic, whatever. Well, Panasonic, that's a brand I haven't thought of in a while. But the problem is that like, then you'll read the bullets that it's like totally wrong. So, one of the things we do is we read our clients' stuff and we check it, and there's always a mistake. There's always something in there, and 9 times out of 10, it's not so much the letter from the lawyer; it's just there's something they missed, and you just got to fix it. But once that issue hasn't been that bad. That issue, I mean, it happens all the time, but it's not that hard to fix once you fix it. It just depends. If the images are problematic, like if you don't put the logo, if you put the logo of Peloton on the image, you're gonna have a problem, right? Don't do that. Don't put the logo of what's compatible with in one of your images. You know
Cool. And thank you. I think that's going to be actually really useful to people. And me too, when I have my Panasonic pa-
what?
portable
What is
CD
Panasonic?
player.
Yeah,
Like I had when I was 15 years old.
Panasonic. What? I know. What do they make anymore? Batteries? I don't know. I know exactly what
Like,
I was thinking. This CD player is what I had.
yeah, a CD player. But I don't even have a CD player anymore. I have no way of playing
No,
CDs anymore.
no, I have an iPod. I'm kidding.
I have my standalone Chinese imported
Yeah,
MP3 player, which is what I
there you
had
go.
25 years ago, which is crazy to think now.
The Alibaba special. I got you.
Yeah, Korean ones. I know you talk a lot about how to get IP, how to improve the value of your business through IP. So, what are some ways in which sellers can, use IP to actually, protect and increase the value of their business?
Yeah, IP is powerful. I mean, we're in a situation now where Amazon is clearly courting China as nothing new, but they're just doing it more and more. And it's harder to launch a brand. It's harder to sustain a brand the moment you get momentum. So I'm a big fan of patents. Now, I don't write patents. I've litigated patents. I don't. I'm not an engineer. I don't have the certain background to actually write a patent. But I believe patents are important these days because if you're launching a product, if you can do it, right, it's so hard to distinguish yourself, and the competitors just pile on the moment you get traction. So IP is really important. Now, trademarks are great too if you can really establish branding. If your branding is like Dude Wipes, right? Like that's the brand that's been thrown around a lot, right? You're just known, right? That really helps. That's distinction, that matters, right? You're not just the 23rd best avocado peeler slicer on Amazon, right? Which is just not going to get you anywhere. So I think to be successful on Amazon, like the days of just showing up and selling a product, I thought those days were long gone in like 2018, 2019, but it seemed like COVID, you had a window where you could just show up and still sell stuff and do all right. Or just leading, if you were kind of starting out just before the shipping crisis where containers went to $30,000 a unit, you still had opportunity. But now it's just like, we're seeing a lot of people exiting, people who didn't know what they were getting into, people who bought courses and courses based on the old way. No, you really need that IP to distinguish yourself, and it's powerful because if somebody's infringing on your IP, like for example, I was just involved in a case not that long ago, huge, huge amount of money. We sued a seller in China when we were able to collect a huge amount of money in that case by freezing their funds with Amazon. We were immediately able to get them knocked off of Amazon with court orders. So you've powerful, powerful means, and it could be copyright is another one. So if you have a unique design to your product, like if you have a product like and you think, this is kind of cool. Like you might be able to copyright that design, in addition to the design patent, you might be able to say, hey, or use copyrighted elements to distinguish your product, right? For example, if you're selling supplements and maybe you're selling a supplement that's, supposed to make you feel stronger. We won't say boost testosterone because that's bad, but like something that's supposed to, right? And maybe you have a picture of some like Jack cartoon dude on it. Like that's so much better than just saying, what's the one that everybody that sort of
Male
um
empowerment.
No, yeah, that too. There's this one that's very popular that's sort of like the unofficial testosterone booster. But if you have it in like a generic bottle that just
Yeah.
says the name of the thing, or
FLMA.
no, it's something. Let me see if I can find it. Now I'm curious. I got to remind myself what it is. But the point is like if you if you have that distinction, right, it
Mm.
makes it so much easier. If you have a generic looking bottle, I'll tell you what I see happen all the time with supplement sellers. Um, their competitors will come in and make a bottle that looks just like theirs.
Yeah.
And because there's no creativity to it, you actually can't establish a copyright. Like if it's just like a purple stripe and it says, so and so, supplements, it's just not enough, right? The copyright office might even say that's just not distinctive enough, so you have no rights. But if you put that effort in, you put artistic elements, and now you've embedded copyright, so that'll help visually distinguish your product from other products, so people don't get confused about the China-based competitor that's trying to copy your look. And if they do copy your look, now you have a case to take them down, right? Um, Trademark, same, again, branding is important, but I just think, IP, without IP, it just seems like you're just basically on a path to obsolescence because you're going to get overrun by your competitors. So you need to build moats. We got to find moats.
I guess there's another thing on that. And when, at one point in the journey, should you be getting, a lawyer or an attorney involved in understanding what's defensible and what's not? I know, I assume a lot of people, I made this mistake back in horrible time ago, 2016, 2017. I named my company. I then tried to, I named my main product line. I then tried to copyright, I tried to trademark it in the UK and got a cease and desist letter from like one of the biggest brands in supplements in the UK saying we own this trademark to do with supplements and we're going to sue you and we're going to take all your money. And it was I talked to an attorney at the time and they were like, you're probably going to win this if you go after it because their use of it is very different from your use, but it's going to take you a year and a half and cost a load of money. You're easy, you can pivot if you want. And I just pivoted to a new name. But I got this letter, so I thought this is just some over litigious, annoying company monitoring trademark filing. So I just called the owner of the company that said it, and they were like, no, we just raised $18 million. We have a legal team that we put on retainer, and they're supposed to do all this. We will destroy you. So at what point should you get an attorney involved in each part of this? I guess trademarks, then copyright, then patents, then suing everyone else.
Yeah. So that's a great question. And ashwagandha is the thing I was thinking of. I couldn't remember ashwagandha. So uh, you pretty much just made the case for getting a lawyer involved. Now the problem is, this is why we created Seller Basics and created this $100 a month program where you can just call a lawyer up and you can go into the portal and set and it's $100 a month. It's not a huge moneymaker for us, but what it is and what it was designed to be was an opportunity for people to, because I was getting sick and tired of meeting clients who were doing really dumb things and getting in really big problems that were so preventable. I'm like, it's like this commercial in the US we have for Geico Insurance where we say 15 minutes can save you, on your insurance. It's like 15 minutes with a lawyer can save you a heck of a lot of hassle. So imagine your situation. Imagine you didn't consult the lawyer. Imagine you didn't get that letter and you spent $20,000 on inventory branding inventory, right?
Oh,
And
I
shipping
spent
it
more.
over
Really,
here.
I had 100 grams worth of inventory when it
So,
happened. Luckily, they didn't want to pursue me fast enough that I solved
so
the
thank
problem.
God. Right. But imagine, and today, like if somebody files a takedown on Amazon, says, you can't sell this, or they threaten to sue. It's like you don't want to waste that money. So it's like that 15 minutes with a lawyer. What can you do? Like, well, if you're applying for a trademark, there's a couple of things. One, it's not just about searching the USPTO, but it's important. You got to check the trademark office. You got to see what trademarks are out there. Are they close? And may not be the same class, but they might be close in category.
Mm.
Or is it a common law problem? So you have to. So the searches we do, we don't just stop. We charge for this because we have to pay an outside service for it, but we actually have to search the entire world, right, of uses of that word in context that might be conflicting with yours. So we can give you that insight. Here's where stands. Here's where we think your chances are. And sometimes you're just like, geez, this isn't worth it. This is not worth it. I'd rather go and go back and try to rebrand and you're thankful you did that before, like you said, you incurred 20, 30, 50, $100,000 of potential loss. And it's and even and it sort of raises another point too that I like to bring up about like what you said, where your lawyer told you like your chances of winning. I could tell you stories of, and this is something what I call really bad lawyering. Not in the part of your guy, I don't know his story, but I'm just saying I see this all the time where client goes to a lawyer and they get threatened with. This actually happened to a client of mine with a major brand. It was happens all the time, but this was one that was on Shark Tank, and it was not even close. It wasn't even close. But the reality is this: they have a lot of money, you have no money. And it doesn't matter in law whether you're right or wrong when it's you versus the other guy, right? It's about who's more money to spend. Whether it's right or wrong is different when it's like Microsoft versus Google. Then they're on a level playing field. But if you're looking for justice, and this is what I explain to my clients all the time, they come to me and they're pissed off because they got ripped off by maybe their 3PL, hosed them out of 10 grand. It's just juice is rarely ever worth the squeeze here because anytime you're talking about going to court, you're six figures plus. Litigation attorneys, litigation is so expensive. People don't realize that. Lawyers kind of do clients a disservice because they'll say, "Oh, well, we'll collect 10 grand up front to get the litigation started, and we'll bill." Next thing you know, your next month's bill is $42,000. So my point being is like most of our clients, and this is how I ask lawyers. Like if you're in court, I'm probably not doing my job very well, right? I mean, there's always exceptions, but for most of my clients, right, there's two things you need to know. Like one, there's no justice in our legal justice system. It's not for us. It's not for the average Joe, right? Um, and two, you just really should be in court, right? Like that's not an option. So when you enter into contracts, when you do business with people, do your due diligence, do your research. Um, Research, and understand it because you just don't want to end up in court one day. You don't want to head down that road. You want to avoid it as much as possible, and you want to understand that like no matter how bulletproof the contract is, no matter how airtight this is, you're not going to court. Like it's just not the money's not going to be there, and you can spend $600 sending somebody a threatening letter, but after that you don't have too many options. So, and when the other side knows that, you're completely have no leverage. It's just a game of leverage. So back to your point, like I think people should get lawyers very early, and I think it doesn't hurt. And this is why, again, why we create a program that's so cheap that it just allows you to, because that run it by a lawyer thing is so important. Because legally, a trademark, it's interesting because legally you have what's called common law rights. So, like theoretically, I could start selling this pen if this was the Paul branded pen, and I could arguably have trademark rights existing the second I start selling this in commerce, even if I don't register. Copyright, the same thing. Like the second I doodle something, I technically have a copyright in that doodle, right? Anything you make, you have a copy. It's a matter of whether you want to go to court on copyright, then you need to register, or if you want to amplify damages that you can claim if somebody's infringing, you need to register. And registration's not that hard for a copyright. Patent is unique. Patent, unfortunately, once a product's kind of commercially shown, once you kind of make it publicly disclosed, right? I'm going to get technical of this, but you have about a year, okay?
Yeah.
You have about a year to file that patent. If you don't file that patent in a year, you lose it. But what can also happen is that if you don't file that patent and somebody else independently comes up with that same idea, right, without tracing it back to you, like just so happen to be like there's Thomas Edison and there's Tesla, and they're both trying to figure out the light bulb, then nobody gets it, right? Like it can be a problem, right? Like so, patent, there's a lot you can do. Patent is a very expensive process, but there's a lot you can do cheaply from the beginning, such as filing a provisional patent, which is a very simple. You can file a provisional patent based off of a napkin. I mean, it's not that complicated. Obviously, the more detailed, the more protected you are. But a provisional patent really gets you a priority date. So it says, today is my day that I start the path to protection. You don't have any actual rights. You can't enforce a provisional patent. But it protects that day so that if anyone else tries to make your product later on, you're protected too. It allows you to put patent pending on your product, and that kind of alerts the public that hey, I'm on the way to patenting this thing, and so you may want to think twice about making it and selling it because eventually, if I get my patent, I'm going to take you down, right? So it sends a deterring message to people, and that patent pending is allowed as long as your patent case is in flux, and that usually takes years. I mean, it's usually like, I don't know, it's been like 2 years before they even respond to a patent application these days. Like it's the first response, like it's really slow. And the problem with trademark is it's also slow. Like, your best case scenario from when you file a trademark to when you get a sense of whether or not it's going to go through. Um, if there's a problem with your trademark, you'll usually hear about it within 6 to 9 months these
Yeah.
days. But by the time you finish the trademark from start to finish, you're talking over a year these days.
Yeah, I think
The office,
my last one was like 18 months to 2 years
yeah,
to get
it's
out
insane.
trademark.
So that's why it's really important to work with a lawyer because you're going to invest all this money, you're going to build a brand, and we know this with Amazon. If you lose your trademark, like if your trademark suddenly goes offline because you didn't get it registered, Amazon takes all your brand registry. They take that, all goes down, right?
Mm.
And now you're back to nothing, and and now you got to build a new brand from scratch. You can't just go. I've talked to Amazon about this. I've tried to get them to see if we could do something about this, but you can't just go, okay, well, I want to change my brand to Delta, or
Yeah, they're
Charlie,
going to want to be assholes about it, about
no, you got to
moving
start over.
moving across.
You got to start over, and that's it. That's just the nature of how it works.
It should be like a Chinese company then, just kind of hammer the
Oh yeah, they,
keyboard with
yeah,
just like the
yeah.
name is patented and trademark is
That's not a bad strategy. People don't understand trademark. That's actually not a bad strategy. Like if you think about it, like you've got, and let's look at cereal. You've got Rice Krispies, you've got Apple Jacks, but what's the actual brand name? Kellogg, right? Your trademark doesn't necessarily have to, that doesn't mean you still have to. Now, this is the other thing people miss, sub trademarks. And this is really important for exiting because this comes up. Because when you sell your business, you're going to make a promise to the buyer that you own your IP. Now, what happens if you're Kellogg's, like that's your brand, your Kellogg cereal, and you sell Rice Krispies, and you sell Apple Jacks, and you sell Fruit Loops, and you sell whatever else, and all of a sudden you realize you never registered the trademark for Apple Jacks because you had brand registry with Kellogg's. You're like, I'm done. But you never thought to get the trademark for Apple Jacks, Rice Krispies, right, and all those guys. Now you've got to promise to the buyer you have those trademarks. I can't tell you how many times that's become an issue because somebody else has the trademark, and you're like, oh my god, if I got to register this, they're gonna say no. So you actually cannot promise the buyer that you have IP. That can kill your deal because that's the most important thing in an e-commerce deal. When you're a product seller, the most valuable asset is your trademark, and a trademark incorporates the goodwill. So if you say, well, the goodwill is the most expensive part of the deal, technically true, but goodwill is part of a trademark. You cannot sever a trademark from its goodwill. It's otherwise, we do it's a legal thing. So yeah, this is something that I think more and more people should be contacting lawyers to say, look at my products, look at my product mix, look at all the products I've created over the last so many years. Do I need to file for some new registrations? Because if you're just relying on that one brand that got you your A plus content, you're doing it wrong. Every time you start a new product, you should be doing trademark research. If you give it a funny name, right? Like if you're giving it a cutesy name of a variation, you need to like even if it's a variation, you need to do the research and say, okay, if you're giving a funny name, you know, give it, get it. You got to do the trademark research. So you know, not to complicate things, but it's this it's sophisticated, right? If you want to sell your business, you're getting into sophisticated transactions. You need to be sophisticated. If you want to just make a few bucks selling trinkets, that's a different story.
Well, it depends how many bucks you can make. Um, so, can you tell us a little bit about Seller Basics and what you guys do, or whether it's Seller Basics or whether it's Raffles and Law that people should be thinking about?
So Seller Basics is a really cool program I started right before COVID, literally right before COVID. Didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. We launched it at a women's conference with Steve Simonson's sister, that's Melissa. Um, it's a cool program. It's $100 a month. It's actually been $100 a month since we launched. And the idea of the program is twofold. One, it's that run it by a lawyer mentality. Like if I offer you the ability to run it by a lawyer for $100 a month, will you do it? And we hope you do. We want you to, right? Because those calls, we've saved so many people from making really bad decisions on those phone calls. And that 90% of the phone calls, people probably think, oh, that phone call is just going to lead to a hard sell push of expensive legal services. Honestly, I statistically, I can say in full faith that is not what happens. 90% of the calls, I don't know, a high percentage of the calls, a very high percentage of the calls lead to nothing. They just lead to us clarifying the person's question, whether it's a scary letter, whether it's can I do this, should I do that, That's typically what the calls are about when we get them. And it's important because we save people from making very, very bad decisions all the time. And it's $100 a month, which after tax deductions, like $3, like $2 a day. It's nothing. The second side of it is the suspension account health stuff. So we don't do account management. We don't know how to make your Amazon listing stronger, better. But what we do know is compliance. What we do know is how to deal with Amazon seller support, how to take things, escalate things if need be, if we see that Amazon seller support's not doing what they're doing. And there's an element of that industry that it's a necessity that we offer that service. Our clients need it. So it's sort of like it's like health insurance. Like I call it like it's not insurance, but it sort of acts like health insurance for your Amazon account. Like if you have an account health problem, just purely account health, right? Whether it's suspension, whether it's ASIN suspension, authenticity claim, IP claim, our team will go and work the Amazon ecosystem with you. Um, and there's no extra charge. It's just $100 a month. There's no co-pays. Or we used to have co-pays, like when we first launched it, we were thinking, but um, yeah, but looking at the data and really, it's a cool program because I think it's aligned with the clients. Like, if you're, you know, out there charging $10,000 for account health services, and that's your only benefit that you offer the world, people call you up and say, I'm suspended. They have to pretend like they're upset about it. Oh, I'm so sorry, but they're stoked because they're going to get a nice. Our program is actually, I like our program because we're actually like aligned with our client on the same page. Like we don't really want you to get suspended, but if you're there, we do a really good job getting people. Our reinstatement rate's really good, and we do a really great job. And I've got a great team that manages that, led by this woman, Joy Williams, who's just, she's like the Amazon whisperer when it comes to account health issues. So that's Seller Basics. And then our law firm is just kind of, um, for whatever you need, intellectual property, corporate, M&A, selling your business, complex issues. I'll tell you something that we've been getting a lot of cases now is a lot of people are sick and tired of the fact that they have these laws that they have to comply with, as we were talking about earlier, but for some reason their competitors in China don't. So we've been doing a lot of takedowns for people, for non-compliant competitors, pushing the regulatory side of Amazon to take notice of the fact that these competitors are not complying with the laws that you're harshly imposing on other Amazon sellers in the U.S. So we've had really great success helping people level the playing field that way. And it's just kind of a smorgasbord. It's like any legal issue an Amazon seller could possibly need. If we don't know it, well, we will know how to help you, even if it's not something we can do. We can help you. So that's what we pride ourselves on doing.
Love it. So if somebody does want to do that, they want to reach out. What's the best way to connect with you?
Sure. My email is just paul@ecom.law. Paul at ecom, ECOM,
Ecom.
one M. Yeah, it's a cool one. I know. I was like, I don't know if it was like the day the .logi domains came out and I just got lucky. I don't know, but it was a good catch.
Yeah.
Um, Paul at ecom.law.
Talking about
If you're
IP,
interested,
I feel like that's the maybe your entire business the rest of your life. You're like,
yeah,
it's
that's
worth
my
a few
domain.
hundred grand, but that domain, that domain
That
isn't.
domain, that domain might be.
It's like people that buy a house and then work their entire lives, and the house has made them 10 million bucks, and the job has
Yeah,
made them nothing.
exactly. Yeah, I bought this in New York City when Brooklyn was selling for a song. When I was a kid in the '70s and '80s, '80s. I'm not
I'm
that
a
old, but
multimillionaire, but I've been an artist my entire life, and you're like,
yeah.
how
But
are
I
you so
bought
great,
a,
that lucky?
yeah, I owned a brownstone in Brooklyn that I bought for 20 grand in the '80s. Now it's worth $20 million. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've
Um,
met people
but
like
yeah,
that.
you can go to sellerbasics.com, SELERBASICS, sellerbasics.com, sign up. It's $100 a month. And the cool thing is there's no contract. You can try it out. If you don't like it, quit. Most people don't leave. We don't feel like we're not T-Mobile or Verizon. We don't need to phone company. We don't need to block people in the contracts. The only thing we say is that if you want the benefit of complimentary account health services, you have to be a member before the bad thing happens. If you're not a member when the bad thing happens, there's like then we have a pre-existing charge, which is something we used to hate about insurance companies, but we have to do that to protect the membership. But aside from that, you're free to try it out, see if it's for you, and set up a phone call with me. It's certainly the cheapest way to get consultations with me. It's a sort of a backdoor way rather than sort of going through our law firm where we charge a lot more for consultations. So they might be shorter, but we get it done. So that's in a nutshell.
I love it. Sounds like you're doing an amazing thing for people, and either that or start a podcast, and then it takes time and energy, and you've got to start a podcast to book on Paul. So it takes a while.
I don't know about podcast. Yeah, I don't know. I like being on podcasts. I can definitely talk, but I just feel like I could just ramble on by myself for too long. It would be bad. So I don't know.
I do a one
But
person podcast. Some people like that.
yeah, it's like da 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 da. Yeah, I can try
Surrounded
that.
by Paul. This
That
listen to me
that's
this way and
true.
this way.
That is tales from the court, even though there's no actual court, but it sounds catchy. You know, trademark pending. So
You're gonna fight them in court to get that trademark for the next
yeah,
20 years. So Paul, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing. I think it's a really valuable episode for people. So if you're going into Amazon, make sure you've got your IP. Make sure you've taken action. Make sure you've talked to Paul and subscribed to SellerBasics. Yeah, thank you for being here, and see you at next episode.